A very good morning to you all. My name is Mary Morrish, and on behalf of the Hope Foundation, I am absolutely delighted to welcome you all to our International Women's Day breakfast. We are especially thankful to our wonderful panel of Vicki O'Toole, Hazel Chu, Holly Cairns, Aoife Moore, Dr. Pixie McKenna, and our host for the morning, Brendan Courtney. They have all given up their time to be with us today. Before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. This event will be recorded, and please submit any questions you have in the Q&A tab at the end of the screen. We hope you come away from this event feeling motivated, inspired, and empowered. At Hope, we work to improve the lives of street-connected and slum-dwelling children, their families, and the wider communities in Calcutta. Calcutta is about the size of Dublin, and 15 million people live there. At least 1/3 of the population live in registered and unregistered slums. On this International Women's Day 2021, I would like to tell you some of the very worrying facts about being a female in Calcutta. India has been ranked as one of the most dangerous places to be born female. It has one of the highest female infanticide incidents in the world. The female child population has decreased by 3 million in the last decade. A female is less likely to receive equal access to education and healthcare than her brother. By the age of 15, 1 in 5 girls in West Bengal are married. Compare this to 1 in every 100 boys. India is a destination, source, and transit country for trafficking. Girls can be sold as prostitutes, for child labour, or for a life of domestic servitude. And now, due to the COVID pandemic, the numbers of trafficking victims have increased dramatically. 500,000 women in India are reported officially missing each year, but the real number runs into the millions. Human trafficking is worth 150 billion a year to the black market. These injustices are so widespread and so prevalent, they can often seem impossible to tackle. However, the Hope Foundation knows that small actions can lead to significant change. Hope works to tackle the root causes of gender inequalities and take action to break the cycle of poverty daily through our projects in Calcutta. By extending support, in particular to girls and their communities via our on-the-ground projects, Hope provides sustainable, holistic solutions to their protection and development. For example, at our many Nabo Asho education centres for street-connected children, we do prioritise enrolment for girls, but this is to ensure that they are enrolled in schools, as they are the ones most likely to drop out. Our Female Crisis Intervention Centre provides shelter, care, support and education to girls that are abandoned or found in very vulnerable situations in Calcutta. These are just 2 of our very many programmes. By providing healthcare, counselling and education, Hope ensures that girls enter adulthood equipped with the tools and support they need to lead healthy and happy lives and to end this age-old circle of poverty. Since Maureen Forrest founded Hope in 1999, we have helped over 2.6 million people, both directly and indirectly. Gender inequality is global injustice and is not specific to any particular place around the world. Change happens at local grassroots level, and we feel that local efforts can lead to national and global change. Last year, before the pandemic, I witnessed personally the incredible work that is carried out by our on-the-ground team in the slums of streets of Calcutta. The work my colleagues do, it's truly humbling. Your support is vital to our fundraising so we can continue to help make an impact on so many people's lives. If you, your company, our community would like to help us, please go to the Hope Foundation website or email me directly at mary@hopefoundation.ie. I would love to hear from you. So on this International Women's Day 2021, Hope continues to carry the mantle to choose this challenge. We are delighted to welcome and learn from our guests of fellow changers, movers and shakers. I'm now going to hand you over to our host for the morning, Brendan Courtney. Brendan is a TV presenter, a producer, award-winning documentary maker, a fashion designer, a businessman and an author. And he is also in the process of completing his Master's in Business, Equality and Inclusion from the Institute of Art, Design and Technology in Dunleary. Thank you so much, and I hope you all have a great morning.
Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you very, very much. And thanks for having me. And thanks everybody for joining us this morning. And thank you for purchasing your ticket for the Hope Foundation. And of course, if you're feeling a little more generous, you can text 4HOPE, the number 4, HOPE, to 50300. As Mary mentioned, I'm joined by an incredible panel of women. Holly Cairns TD. Hi, Holly, how are you? Social Democrats. The brilliant Lord Mayor of Dublin, Hazel Chu, who's just an amazing, amazing mover and shaker. The amazing Dr. Pixie McKenna, who we know and love, GP and TV presenter. Aoife Moore, the new backbone of Irish journalism, and the wonderful Vicky O'Toole, Managing Director of JJ O'Toole. So I'll come to our panelists in a minute, and I suppose it's nice to put a bit of perspective in why I find myself sometimes talking on International Women's Day. I grew up seeing myself as an honorary woman. I grew up in a matriarchal house with sisters. My mother always ran her own business. And what's interesting as we grow older, we realize Ireland is actually a matriarchal society. It's just that women tend to run the home and get left behind in terms of leadership. And what's I have seen as a fashion designer and a retailer, and my business partner is Sonia Lennon, who is very, very, very vocal about the gender pay gap and gender equality. And in fact, I'm not gonna lie, I rang her for some notes yesterday. Amazing woman. We have noticed, and this is really tangible, that in the last year, in terms of fashion and retail, of course, everything has changed, but women have really, and we can see it at the till, put themselves last. So menswear, kidswear, food, breaking records in terms of purchasing, but women are literally not shopping for themselves. So again, women putting themselves last. If we look, don't take my word for it, and as Mary alluded to, 80% of frontline care workers globally are women, yet we're seeing so few men, spokeswomen from NEFIT. So where are the men explaining what's happening to us? And if we drill deeper into that, we're seeing literally in the UK, for example, on Sage, it's only 16% women. So we've got the women doing all the hard work again, but making very few decisions. And then the UN Women's Report just came out, who's doing all the care? Women are leaving paid work to take up unpaid work in the last year. So COVID threatens to actually turn back the dial in terms of gender equality globally, particularly. So it really has infiltrated all our lives. And we're seeing it in all walks of life, in all countries across the world. So I feel really privileged to be here, and I'm very passionate about it. And I am doing a master's degree in equality, diversity, inclusion, and gender comes up all the time as one of the most prominent issues that seems to keep coming back again and again. And as one area seems to start fluidly sorting out the gender imbalance, another area falls away. And I think currently it comes down to care and who's doing all the care, and women are doing all the heavy lifting, whether it's professionally or domestically. And there is a value on that care as well. Like, that care is worth 9% of global GDP. That's equivalent to $11 trillion US dollars. That's the value of that care. And until we start putting a value on that care and recognize that, I think we're going to keep encountering these problems. Rant over, and my justification for being here. And obviously it's something I feel very passionate about. I have two sisters who have children. I see it all the time. So I'll jump straight in, and to take it nice and broad, I'm going to ask you, Holly, actually, do you feel that, as just start with you, and please, obviously, panelists, jump in wherever you feel passionate or you want to say anything. Do you feel as a woman you're held to a higher standard than your male colleagues in the Dáil?
Yes, I think that's quite likely. I suppose we know that there's such a low percentage of female politicians, so it's quite new to see women in the Dáil. And I suppose just when you look at some of the most impressive TDs, I think in the last Dáil, people like, for example, Kate O'Connell not being re-elected, I think that really says it all, that how could somebody like that not get re-elected? And so many other TDs do, that may be surrounded by scandals and mistakes, and their male counterparts seem to have no problem getting re-elected. So I suppose it's quite evident when you just look at the facts in relation to Irish politics that women are held to a higher standard, and often have to kind of outperform their male counterparts in situations where they're often perhaps disregarded as well. I remember going to a hustings during the election, and it was they'd be for all different topics in the run up to elections, and I was particularly excited about the agriculture ones because I did my master's in it. I grew up on a farm. I've worked in the industry. But when I actually got to the debate, when the chair of it was asking the different election candidates the questions, he would refer to everybody as, for example, Councillor Paul Hayes, Deputy Collins. And when he came to me, he'd say that little girl instead of Councillor Cairns. Like, just everywhere. Yeah, I think,
I had read about that. So, this is a safe space. I mean, what do you do with that? Where do you go with that professionally? And fortunately or unfortunately, in your position, you have to be super professional. You have to represent all the time. How do you deal with that?
I think the same way as all women in every field, because this is not unique to politics, and I think we all know that. I think the ad on TV at the moment, the ladies Gaelic football ad, when the women are playing uphill, I think that does a really good job of just for all of us visualizing what the reality is. So people playing with the odds stacked up against them and still pushing for that equality. It's in every single field. And unfortunately, it just requires perseverance. But what we really need is for actions to be taken to level that playing field. And I think we can all visualize that too. That visualization is really helpful. And there's, really proactive steps that we can take to do that in every sector. And I speak a lot about female participation in politics, because I think that often it needs to come from the top down. If we had more women, you spoke about NEFIT, at those decision-making tables, I don't know, would there be a complete absence of state childcare? I don't know, would there be, such a gender pay gap? I don't know if there'd be such a disparity in funding between female sports and male sports. I don't know if you'd be 95% more likely to hear a male Irish artist on the radio than a female one. So I think, we need more equality in every sector. And I speak a lot about politics, I suppose, because I think people at those, we need women at the decision-making tables. And I hope that would filter down into every sector, like, frontline workers, carers. Yeah.
So Hazel, I'm going to jump on to you because you became a councillor in 2019, elected chairperson of the Green Party, and then 2020 became Lord Mayor. So you've moved pretty effectively through politics to get where you are now. And would it be fair to say that you've smashed a few glass ceilings on your way, Hazel? Your microphone's on.
Sorry, but I'll mute just in case. The little one has tonsillitis, so I'm muting just in case she's screaming in the background at some point. Fair, but also perhaps a little kind of inaccurate insofar. What has happened is a lot of luck has got me here as well. So like, I'm not going to deny the hard work or anything else, but politics is about luck and timing. And it's about kind of, to Holly's point there about our lack of representation. What we have 21% in the Dáil, 22% on the council level. Out of 950 odd women, that's only 22% that are women, and 950 odd people, that's only 22% that's women. And then you have 30% in the Oireachtas, in the Seanad. So those numbers are shockingly low because there's also a lack of will and a lack of push and a lack of people going, well, you know what, we should run more women. So like Holly used Kate as an example there, her party ran her. But then I also like look at the supports she got and how things were managed. And I'm not saying, I'm not asserting any blame on anyone, but I'm just saying, if you want women to get in, you will back them, and you will back them to the hilt until you get there. And you can see that in every party and in every organization, that like those that really do want women at the table will move mountain and earth to get people there. Like we have Shannon by-elections coming up, and I noticed that Fianna Fáil will be running a male candidate. So now Fine Gael will be running a female on the panel they're running, but Fianna Fáil is going to be running a male candidate, and I don't see any women there. So they had a plethora of really good women. They had a plethora of people from a diverse background. Like there was someone from ethnic minority background, the Longford councillor, and she would have been amazing. And why not break that glass ceiling with people and support people and go and put your full backing behind people. That takes courage as well. That takes change. So as much as women can push themselves out there, as much as they can try to break the glass ceiling themselves, there needs to be systemic change from people to say, listen, we're willing to be more inclusive. We're willing to support and not just pay a lip service.
And so on that, Hazel, do you feel that there's been a moment in your career that you recognize that you've had to work harder than your male counterparts? Have you ever felt that as a woman? And I'm talking about...
There's been many a moment, so I'm not sure which one. And this isn't meant to say, this isn't meant to have a go at men. This is the thing about International Women's Day. I would love if more men joined us on the day and joined us in challenging these so-called norms, and joined us in, like yourself, joining us to support women. And because there has been times through the career, I've gone from NGO to music production. I used to be going from a music runner to then production manager in a festival. I worked as head of function for for a multinational again, and you and I would have known each other from working in NDRC. So, and now I'm in politics, and at every juncture there has always been an incident. Like one meeting I had in a multinational when I was talking, and I was a project manager talking, a male colleague put their hand in front of me to go shh. So like as in shh. So, and I'm there going, sorry, what? As in when they wanted to talk, they just went shh. And I was like, oh my God, what the hell just happened there? So, and then you have that in politics. I've heard that clip of Holly being called a little girl by a board member of an organization, even when she's TD. And I've had references to me on whether this is a tokenistic approach. Oh, we had Black Lives Matter movement, so we need to put someone of color in there, and that's what happened. That's why people put Hazel in there. So and you will always have that. And I like to say, until we are so comfortable with having women, and it's so normal that people don't automatically question why they are there and if they belong there, that's when we have real and proper change. Because people shouldn't look at women and go, oh, it's only because of gender quota, or it's only because there's tokenism in that role. So.
Yeah, and I think quotas and targets are a whole other morning to have a conversation about, right? The UN states that gender equality is over 100 years away, and I will lift the mood shortly, I promise. We'll stop beating down on it. And I have a great tip, by the way, for how to get men into this conversation, which we'll talk about later. What major changes, I'm going to throw this out to the panel, do we think that we need to make tangible differences to achieving gender equality going forward? And I'll start with you, Pixie, if you don't mind. And well, I'm talking, you can come at it from the frontline worker, care worker, if you like.
I mean, for me, I was just speaking on it yesterday. The big thing, I think, for young girls in school in Ireland at the moment is to try and get them in, from my perspective, get them into STEM careers. There are so many jobs of the future, the opportunities to change. Gosh, you know, social prejudices, empower women. There is, and it's to try and get about 50% or more girls when they go into transition year in Ireland just completely go away from STEM subjects because they think actually boys do it better, etc., etc. So I think that's a really, really important thing. And I very much champion the fact that actually education is freedom for women. If you can find your niche, you can do it generally, probably a lot better than the boys. So it's really about empowering them to make those choices, break the mold and get out there, because I think that will change. You know, we'll see more women as CEOs, we'll see more women involved in politics, we'll see more women getting out there and doing those things, and definitely changing the shape of the future for the younger girls that are coming up.
In terms of the medical, like the numbers are getting better. There's more female medical students than there are male, which is
far more.
Yeah, which is kind of amazing. But still globally, we're seeing women on the front line of healthcare work much more. And we're seeing, as we said, really poor representation. Like NEFID, actually, the figures aren't too bad in terms of female representation, but there's no female spokespeople. It's just bizarre when you sit and think about it. Do you think there's anything, like even, I mean, I know sometimes we feel when we're talking about these issues, we're speaking into an echo chamber sometimes, but do you think there's anything we can do to address that in terms of representation at higher levels in the medical profession?
I think it's slowly. I mean, I qualified 25 years ago, and I mean, you know, it was, the assumption was you were a girl, you were going to be a GP, you'd be a part-time GP, you'd marry a doctor if you were lucky, and that'd be fine. You go off and have babies. I mean, if it was never, I mean, if you had said you were going to be an orthopedic surgeon or something, you'd be laughed at. You'd be completely laughed at. When you went into theatre as a medical student, or even as a junior doctor, I mean, you were told just stand there and hold this, because you don't need to know what's going on in here, because you'll never be doing that. You know, that's not for you, love. Actually, can you go make me a cup of tea? I mean, I can't tell you how many times I had to make tea for surgeons, tie up their gowns, you know, all this type of stuff, not actually get involved in now I would have been a hopeless surgeon, let me tell you, but So I think, gosh, you know, I mean, for me, it's very much about encouraging young girls to you know, to get out there and have courage to go into those spaces where we feel that it's the men are dominating. Get in there, have courage. And you know, sometimes it's about getting in there and not being afraid to fail. Sometimes you'll make mistakes along the way, but get in there and challenge those stereotypes, and you know, break the mold, go the path less traveled, and color outside the lines. And you know what, you will rock the boat, I'm sure. My gosh, I mean, you know, in terms of Irish politics, I mean, Holly and Hazel, you know, it's I think it's phenomenal to see that. But I shouldn't even be saying that it's phenomenal to see that. That should be normal. So it's hard, but it is about, you know, and I think it very much is about just getting in there and having courage and saying, I can do this. I'll definitely be able to do this.
Yeah. Speaking of people who break the mold, our next two panelists, Vicky O'Toole and Aoife Moore, in their own rights are mold breakers. But Vicky, I'm going to come to you as the MD of JJ O'Toole. Depressingly, only 8% of Fortune 500 companies have female CEOs. 8% of the Fortune 500. I mean, that's quite a shocking statistic still. And it doesn't get much better at executive level, with about 20% female representation at executive level. So the top tier of leadership in terms of business is still very male dominated. First of all, how do you feel about that? And second of all, how do you think we can get more women into leadership roles? My opinion is, my modest opinion is, leadership is very important to have more women at leadership level, because that really infiltrates the rest of the ranks. So from your perspective as a leader in business, how do you feel about those figures, and what do you think we can do to get more women in?
I think the figures are shocking, but I just wanted to, I suppose, talk about my whole personal experience in this. I mean, I wouldn't be running this business if my husband hadn't passed away. And so, you know, I mean, that's why I'm in it. I mean, I didn't get it because, you know, you're a woman. It just so happened that I was next in line. But when I was listening to you all speaking earlier on, I was just thinking about how are we going to change all of this. I come from a family business, and I have two sisters and a brother, and my brother was the eldest. Now, this is a typical Irish situation, and this is what happens in Ireland and other countries. None of the girls were ever asked to go into the family business. It was my brother, because he was the eldest, but he was a boy. And in my late husband's company or business, our family, he was a boy, and he was running the company with his brother. There was no sister, there was no girls around. And I have spoken at many family business events, and you've companies like Flavin's, Porridge, and, you know, all of those. And it's always has been the men that have been picked. And it's a bit like, you know, farming. If you think about Ireland, it's the boys that get the job. And it is this thinking that we have in this country. Now, it's certainly improved. There's no question about it. I really do believe, and I know we touched on this, you know, we were talking about it before, but we need to be role models. Women need to be role models, and women need to support one another. And if you think about it, like, I do a bit of public speaking, which I absolutely hate doing because I get so nervous. And I'm asked to speak so often at women events, and they're all women. You know, and I always say, why don't we have the men? We all need to be more inclusive together, men and women, and talk about this together. But I also think, and I think too much, obviously, but I have 5 children, 3 boys, 2 girls, and I treat them all equally. It doesn't matter if they're girls or boys. I believe that they can do whatever they want. If it's doctors, solicitors, nursing, artists, designers, whatever it is. And I think it comes sometimes at home. It comes from the school. It comes from from what's happening at home. You need role models. And when I was younger, when I got married, my job was to be a parent. Like, literally, my late mother-in-law said to me, I had a job interview for AIB, and because I gave up law, and I was very young when I met Fergus, and I remember going for an interview with AIB up in Dublin. I came down by train, and she was a fabulous lady, real matriarch, and she said, what were you doing? Were you shopping today? And I said, no, I had an interview with AIB. Now, I was engaged. I only knew Fergus 9 months. It was a whirlwind romance. And she said, but you're not going to be working, are you? You're going to be at home, and you're going to have babies, and and I kind of thought at 20 years of age, that I was 21, this is great. Loving the idea of this, never going to have to work. It's fabulous. But that is the mentality that there was years ago. And I know even if Fergus hadn't passed away, and if I didn't go into the business, I would be doing something, because that's the kind of person, I mean, there was no way I wanted to stay at home. But my point is that my 5 children, the eldest 3 had me full time. And then, you know, the youngest 2 didn't have me as much as the eldest. None of them are different. In fact, if anything, you know, they all, you know, they didn't lose out on anything because I was working. I think if anything, they have learned to be more independent by watching me working outside of the home. And I do think you need role models. And I think we need to stand up as CEOs, or, you know, head of doctors, politicians. We need to support one another, and we need to bring people on with us. And we need to be able to, they need to see what we're doing, that it's achievable, you know, with a degree or with no degree, you know, because you have to go into a business or not, or whatever it is. I mean, I am the proof, no degree, and here I am running a business and still learning. I mean, you know, learning every day, but it can be done. And I just think we need to stop listening to the naysayers. I have been listening to them every single day since I went into business. I mean, you're a woman, how could you possibly do this? And just the one thing I want to say, when I was listening to your stories about, you know, derogatory comments against women, there is one story that will stand out in my mind. It was my very first business meeting. It wasn't even a business meeting. I was brought along by the sales manager to introduce me to a client years ago. So happened to be Newbridge, not mentioning the client. And I had no title, I had no nothing. I hadn't a clue about a bag or a box. I run a packaging company. I didn't know what it was. But I remember sitting at this round table with 3 gentlemen from the company. There were buyers, with our sales manager, John Hayes, and myself. And I was introduced. He said, "What do I introduce you as?" And I said, "Vicky, my name is Vicky." So I sat there. So he said, "This is Vicky O'Toole, JJ O'Toole Ltd." So they started talking about Gaelic. They started talking about everything under the sun except business. I was totally excluded from the conversation, 100%. I wasn't, you know, I might as well have been a little fly on the wall. And then hurling went to Gaelic football, went to golf. And I was kind of a handy golfer. I said, they're going to ask me what my handicap is now. I know they're going to include me in this conversation, but they didn't. And then actually one of them said, "Oh, do you golf? I mean, you 5 kids, you probably don't have time." I said, "Do you actually? I play off. My handicap is 10. And suddenly there was respect, nothing to do with business, never brought into it, but because I was a good golfer. And it really annoyed me. And when it came to business, I was totally excluded. Now, that doesn't happen anymore. And that has never happened anymore. But the one thing I did learn after that conversation is I'm going to learn about GAA, because, you know, this is going to help sell bags. And I actually so happen to be a massive Limerick hurling fan way before. I did not jump on the bandwagon, I mean, since we won our All-Irelands. But the way they dealt with me was appalling at the time. And I had that at work. When it was 80% men when I joined the company, it's now about 75% women. Not because it's a women-man thing, or it's because our business type is more, I suppose, it's more becoming more creative. I need, you know, it just so happened that there are women. I mean, I'm waiting for a woman to actually apply for a warehouse manager job, or a warehouse job. Because I don't see any difference. There's nothing we can't do that they, but I do think that we need to deal with each other equally, men and women, to come together.
Unless we forget, and I know that there's some school students on this today, lest we forget, I mean, our mothers' generations, if they worked in the civil service when they were married, they had to stop working. They had to retire for marriage. I mean, that's not that long ago. That's only a generation ago. Hazel, before you go very quickly, I know you have to go very quickly. I want to just acknowledge the harassment you and your family received, and say how terribly sorry I am for that. But I wonder, and I just get your broad sweep on this, would that have happened to a man, do you think?
In fairness, it would have, in like, if you look at Simon Harris, he got it outside his home as well. Right. So I'm not about to say it wouldn't happen to a man, but let's put it this way. So far in row, I have had 2 petitions to ask me to resign because they didn't like how I looked. I've had at least 2 petitions to call for a protest outside my house. Last week, I had someone joke about my car exploding when I turned on the key. So I've had my 3-year-old being referenced in relation to a sexual act in someone else. So I have had a plethora of stuff. I like to actually thank Aoife while she's here, because it's because Vicky talked about women supporting women, and it's because of women like Vicky and Circa and Ellen that it's been publicized, and that people understand that myself and Holly and others get this type of crap when you're in politics, and it completely puts women off politics. But to Vicky's point, and I think Pixie said it as well, it can't, however, even though it's a barrier, it can't stop us. We need to keep going. We need to find solutions on how to support people in going. And from a political side, that comes down to the parties. It's the parties' will of wanting to run people. And on a societal side, that falls down on all of us to not be innocent bystanders. The guards have been really supportive. The likes of Aoife have been really good in being supportive. And Aoife, thank you so much. So, and the likes of yourself, Brendan, once you heard, you were saying, listen, what can I do? And how do we make things more inclusive? And you have knowledge in the background. So it's about having that chat and being able to say, listen, we're not going to stand by this, be it gender equality or be it some people being harassed because of their race or gender, or just pretty much because they don't like the looks of people. We as a society need to say, we're not going to have any more of this. So there shouldn't be that. So yeah, I think if I was a man in this role currently, probably not as much, but it has happened to men before, in fairness. So.
And before I let you go, because I know the students watching, do you have any little tips or nuggets of advice for girls or women who would be considering a life in politics?
Yes, run. Just no matter what, run. And the amount of times I have held myself back in the past saying, oh, should I run? Or someone telling me you shouldn't run, or it's not the right time.
For clarity, you don't mean run away, right? You mean run.
That too. You may have to do that once things start. But no, as in run for politics, or ask people who are in politics for advice, or who deal with politicians for advice. You have a plethora of people here, like Holly will be able to give you an insight on what the Dáil is like. Email me, lordmayor@dublincity.ie. I'm happy to answer any questions. That's the important thing. Like I got a first hand, thankfully, through the other half, what politics would be like. I didn't fully grasp how bad the abuse would be, but you get in there and you realize, well, there's a reason why people don't like the likes of me in this role, because they don't view it as normal. So as long as we maintain the status quo, things will not change. However, if we run more people, if we run more women, if we run more people from diverse backgrounds, the status quo will change, and normal will be different, and then people won't be so fearful. And it's all about converting that fear to something positive. I think differences should be celebrated. I never fully understood why kids called me out for having different eyes or skin color. And I think if we understood that differences should be celebrated, and in politics, the only way to show there should be difference is by putting someone there that looks different and that people can relate to, then that's where we will be going. And so to anyone who is watching this and even inkling about going into politics, I would say, please do run. Come canvassing with me. So, and we can, like, when we can go back canvassing, and you'll know firsthand, or just talk to people. But I would say, do not, no matter how bad the stories you hear, just don't let that put you off, because there's a lot that we need your generation, and we need people like you to be part of, to make things better. So, brilliant. And again, I'm really sorry I have to run away. So, and it was lovely meeting you all. So thank
you so much, Hazel. Have a great day.
I didn't get to hear Aoife speak yet, so sorry. Thanks. 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 Bye.
Aoife, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to get around everybody.
No, you're fine.
I'm very excited about talking to you, Aoife, because you've shaken the world of journalism as well as politics in one fell swoop, and one amazing story. You broke Golfgate, and everybody knows what happens. The European Commissioner effectively was gone. I wanted to ask Golfgate, kind of on the back of what Vicky described, you know, and as somebody who was excluded because I was a young gay kid who couldn't really hide that I was gay. So I was excluded from sport. So I actually really related to what Vicky was saying, and that exclusion, it makes me shudder. It's ingrained in my childhood. Do you think that would have happened to a group of women Golfgate? And I know that's a really clunky question, but you saw it unfold. Would a group of women have been that silly?
Absolutely not. I think women in politics, especially because they know they're held to a higher standard, they are very wary about everything that every invitation they accept, everything that they do, because they know it can be used against them, whether it's on social media or whatever it is. I think, the rules changed that day. Dara Cleary was on the radio that morning saying COVID loves to party, and then went to that dinner that night. So I don't think that, I think the day after, when Liveline kind of blew up, it's the one thing that sticks in my mind the most about Golfgate is the episode of Liveline the next day. But what I did take away from it was the number of women. There was the last caller was a woman who called in, and she was just like everybody's mammy. And she was saying, like, did no one have the sense or the cop on to say, why are we here? This is wrong. And I don't think it's because, I don't know, female politicians are more virtuous than men. I don't think that. It's because that they are so aware, and every politician, every female politician in the Dáil, I would easily say gets twice the abuse that a male politician gets. And I just don't think Golfgate would have happened if it had been women because of that. And the other thing I would point out, and I think it tells you a lot about the Oireachtas and the Oireachtas Golf Society, the only woman who was invited on her own account, there was one woman. Everyone else who was invited was someone's partner or someone's wife. There was one woman, a former Labour senator, who was the only person who got an invitation off her own back. So I think that tells you a lot about the cliques in Leinster House, how the Oireachtas works. And it's an indictment, I think, on the Oireachtas and how it's run for such a long time, because maybe if they had been a bit more friendly, were a woman, somebody might have turned around and said to them, here, I don't think you should be going. I don't think they should go ahead.
Yeah, it displays lots of different things that we don't need to go into now. But while speaking to you, I'm really fascinated about the world of media, about the world of journalism. There's so many other areas I'd love to pick your brains on, but specifically, let's say with International Women's Day. Geraldine Kennedy was the first female editor of a national daily in 2002. Mm-hmm. Now all three major daily newspapers are male editors. So we're still, even in media, we're seeing at the top echelons there are, I can tell, in RTE, while there is a female chair and a female director general, below them it's 80% male. Mm-hmm. So what we're seeing at executive, we're still seeing. So in terms of media, and I know from my own point of view, just analysing that, is it not time for now a female editor of a national newspaper?
I would love it. The only outlet I think that has two female editors is the journal.ie. They've had female editors for quite a long time. I don't think the Examiner, now backstabbing my employer here, have ever had a female editor. We have a female news editor now, but we've never had a female editor-in-chief or a female political editor for that matter. What I think is quite funny is that you will often see, articles about like lamenting the lack of women. Say we'll just use STEM, right? Just as totally hypothetical, right? So you'll read an article that says only 30% of women or only 30% of STEM jobs are being taken by women. And you're like, oh, isn't that terrible? And there must be this mad cognitive dissonance in the newsroom that put out that story, because in newsrooms you will often find that the gender disparity is massive. So they're writing about gender disparity in other realms, whether it's boardrooms or STEM or whatever it is, not noticing that there's also massive gender disparity in their own industry. And what I find, and it actually reminds me of law. So my cousin's a solicitor and she said it's quite the same. When you go into a newsroom, you will find there's quite a lot of female reporters at the kind of lowest level, junior reporter, out and about. You'll find a lot of women. When you move up, the women get less and less and less until there's barely any. And the thing with journalism, I would say, is it's not a 9 to 5. It's not conducive to, a kind of nuclear family life. If especially most of the journalism jobs in Ireland are focused in Dublin, so you have the added bonus of a second mortgage, the equal of a second mortgage for childcare, and then also massive house prices. So women are consistently held back because even if you wanted to stay at your job, your husband is more likely to make more money than you anyway. You won't be able to afford childcare, and you're probably paying rent that's around a third or nearly half of your wage. So I don't think in any industry, I don't think we're going to move gender equality on until the state does something about childcare. I mean, I don't have a mortgage. I also don't have children. I don't know if I'll ever be able to buy a house, but I could tell you right now, I wouldn't ever be able to afford childcare. So I would have to quit my job because my partner makes more money than me. And that would be, in my opinion, a loss to journalism. A loss to my life. My job is like my passion. So, but at the end of the day, if you've got mouths to feed, it completely changes your.
And you've actually literally jumped ahead of where my brain was going with all four remaining panelists. I'm going to ask that. So I'm going to try and leave the audience with some hope. So I was just about to ask you, what do you think are the barriers to that level up? And you've just explained that. So I'm going to go back to you about what you think we can do to improve that. But Pixie, in terms of representation on higher levels of, medical boards, whether it's NEFIT, SAGE, I mean, shockingly in Italy, there are no women on any of the boards of emergency representation, never mind spokespeople. What do you think are the barriers in terms of your industry to get women up to the leadership levels?
Definitely family. I mean, and you trying to balance, trying to juggle all the balls, it's the biggest pressure from, I only have one child, but it is the biggest pressure, I think, on women in terms of returning to the workplace. And also that conception that when you go back, people are looking at you going, oh, you're only working part-time, or oh, she's back from maternity leave. I had the opposite. I went back very, very early because I was in the height of doing telly and everything. And I had the other extreme, which is people looking at me going, I was like some kind of bad mother because I had come back too soon. Where's your child? Who's looking after your baby? Is your baby only 6 weeks old and you're in doing a shoot? Or you're, so I think it's supporting people in being able to go back to work, to have affordable childcare, and to be able to do, I hope this whole working from home thing has made a difference, and that women will be able to do a lot more from the home, and they'll be able to juggle, because we're very good at that. We're very good at multitasking. So I really think it is that, because it's hard. And as Aoife said, it's very expensive, childcare, very, very expensive.
Yeah, my sister and her husband, who I lived with when they had their first baby in town, and then they bought a house in Wicklow, moved out. But he would say, people never ask me if I miss the baby when I go to work. They're constantly asking her. He's like, I kind of find that a little offensive. Like, nobody ever asks me, do I miss the baby? Holly, I'm going to come to you now. So again, the numbers are, we won't drill into the depressing numbers, but what is it, childcare that's the barrier in terms of politics, do you think?
I think it's a huge, big barrier. And like Aoife spoke about there, it would be a logistical impossibility at present for me to have a family. So, when you consider that there's no maternity provisions for female politicians at council level, for senators or for TDs. We have our first ever minister at the cabinet table who's pregnant, and there's no provisions there for her. And it sends out a message, essentially, which is you have to make a choice between your career and a family. That's the message that it sends out at the moment. So as a number one, things like that need to be addressed. But I think there are other barriers there as well. So, unfortunately, I think one of the biggest barriers to female participation in politics are the biggest parties. And actually not so much the biggest as the oldest. So they just don't seem to be able to engage women in politics. And I have massive concerns about that, because I don't think you can endeavour to govern a society that promotes equality if it doesn't exist within your own party. And it does seem to be the older parties that struggle with it. For example, the Labour Party don't have any female TDs. Fianna Fáil out of 37 TDs have 5. And then, how can we expect them then to be, and we know that they've never been serious about providing state childcare, that I'm just so sick of being governed in that kind of a way by essentially an old boys club that has been, since the foundation of the state. And, that was a changing point for women. And like you talked about, we're not that far away from, my grandmother got married, she had to quit her job, her PPS number became her husband, so did her name. We're not that far away from that. So of course it still exists. And I know that, you spoke about gender quotas being a conversation for a whole other day, but I think it's worth noting that they're effective. And, you know, Vicky spoke about role models and the need for them, but we can't keep expecting women to defy the odds when they're so stacked up against them to become role models for other women when there's still all of these barriers, like, you know, childcare. And so often, you know, we've this gender pay gap, that it's more affordable to stay at home and look after your kids than pay for childcare. These barriers, you know, there's very obvious things that we can address. And I think the thing holding us back from addressing them is that there isn't women there making those decisions, making the policy decisions that we need to positively affect women into the future. You know, even like I'm on the Dole Reform Committee. It's a committee that has been reviewing the standing orders for the Dole, so the rules of the Dole, for almost 100 years. So there's a consistent committee in place to look at these standing orders. And, you know, I'm a new member of that committee. I noticed that in the standing orders, it said chairman 137 times. It said chairperson twice, and it said chairwoman 0 times. So I think we need to acknowledge how ingrained it is. And nobody had noticed this in this consistent committee that happens once a week for 100 years. So that will be changed now. I requested that it was, and it will be, you know, coming to the Dole next week, a new publishing of the standing orders. But I also raised the need that, like, we've noticed that, you know, how helpful it is for people to be able to attend committee meetings, for example, remotely. It's something we should keep up in order to make this more of an accessible job for people with families and stuff. And the Cairn Quarter was saying, oh, no, this is strictly in our constitution. I'm kind of thinking, would it be in our constitution if more people in government had uteruses this entire time? I don't think so. You know, so it just needs to change. And I know people don't like gender quotas, but one quick last example. There was a study done by the University of Leeds that had, you know, examining boards of financial organisations. The boards that had just one female member were significantly less likely to go bankrupt. Do we want that in our, for example, government, in our media outlets? Yes, we do. We need it. And of course, we don't know what a imbalance the other way would look like. But I think what we're all looking for is equality. Like I said, it's not about pitching men up against women. It's about leveling the playing field. Yeah,
and the business case for gender equality is phenomenal, and it rings true. And it's just, if you Google business case for gender equality, it's really interesting. I just want to remind people very quickly, if they feel like donating, they can just text the number 4 HOPE to 50300. That's 4 HOPE to 50300 to make a donation, or go to the website, make a donation there as well. I'm going to go to Q&A now, because we've gone over time a little bit, because you're all just amazing. Thank you so much. It's really enlightening. And I'm trying to, there's a couple of questions people want to ask, which there's a couple of times come in, how to get more men involved. I have a tip for that, by the way. But I don't actually really, I find that irritating. And the reason, just to give my perspective on that, the reason I'm doing a Master's in Equality, Diversity, Inclusion is because I was Ireland's first openly gay TV presenter. I don't think so, but I was first openly, right? And I got sort of tagged with that. And that was like 1999, 2001, 2, 3, I started my career. And then I very actively campaigned for marriage equality. And then I went and I became a bit more of a campaigner about ageism and care for older people in Ireland, because my dad was sick, and I made a film about that. And I kind of got sucked more and more into doing talks like this in corporates. And one day I was in, which will remain unnamed, a really nice, and not an International Women's Day, it was actually their EDI Day, Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Day, that you'll see big, as you know, big corporates will run EDI days where they try and be a bit more inclusive, and sometimes they can feel tokenistic and sometimes they're amazing. But in the meeting, exactly what we were just talking about, somebody at the end of which it was, lots of diverse people and lots of women, but very few men who looked like me. And somebody put their hand up at the end and said, next time, can we have more men here? And it just came out of me. I said, were they not invited? And they were invited and they didn't come. So we've drilled into this a little bit. And my tip for this is, myself and Sonia were talking about this, is actually men are afraid of saying the wrong thing in rooms like this. So unless they're invited specifically. So what we ask when we host events like this is to bring an ally with you. So if everybody who comes, who wants to attend, asks a friend to come with them, then they know that they're coming with somebody and they're not afraid to make mistakes. I'm not making excuses for men, but it's a way to start that conversation that's a little easier on everybody involved. So there are questions coming in here. Okay, great. I'm just going to throw this at the 4 of you. You can think about it. And we'll start with you, Vicky. What is your superpower? That's a question, and I'm just going to ask it.
Okay, I probably multitasking. It probably has to be it. I think, you know, running a business, cleaning the house, doing the garden, you know, keep going. I think it's been able to multitask and being able to do it, have loads of balls up together at the same time, and above all, I suppose, not panic during all of that. I think that's the thing, and not giving up. If I'm allowed to throw in another one, I think that's very, very important. And for any of the young students there listening, and that to me would be the biggest lesson, irrespective of what you end up doing, where you end up going. It's just never giving up. Life is tough. We have good times, we have bad times. They all pass. You know, you got good times, enjoy them. You have bad times like the pandemic, they will pass as well. But you just keep going, be positive. And I've now gone on a tangent, but you know, so multitasking, boom.
Aoife, what's your superpower to inspire the audience of predominantly female, but and there's some young girls from schools and stuff like that who are looking to be inspired for their careers going forward. So
this is something I've curated over a couple of years, but I'm very rarely intimidated. And I actually think I started at university, but no, to be honest, I was a nightmare at school as well. I think it probably comes from like lack of respect. It started as lack of respect for authority, but now it's just I'm not easily intimidated. And I think that's really important. I think Holly could probably attest to that as well, and so can Vicky actually, that like sometimes you're in rooms, like for instance, in my job with world leaders, you know, I've like interviewed the Prime Minister Theresa May and Donald Trump, and I think a superpower at times can be realizing that everybody is exactly the same. Like you're no better than anyone, but no one's any better than you, and people are just people at the end of the day. And I think especially in politics, like I'm not going to pretend that I've always been this like super confident journalist, because when I first started, when I first came to Dublin to work in politics, I didn't ask any questions at press conferences because I didn't A, think my questions would be interesting enough, and B, no one could understand my accent. And then if they asked me to repeat myself, I got really embarrassed. And certain politicians would make quite a pantomime out of the fact that they couldn't understand my accent.
Wow.
To be fair, only men did that. And it really put me off asking questions because my big fear was, what? And then I would have to repeat my question, which I already thought was a bit crap anyway, again, in front of a crowd of people, sometimes being live streamed on RTE or Virgin Media. So I haven't always been this way, but I do think learning not to be intimidated and always having like backing yourself, because especially for young people, I would always say that like, even if you're applying for a job and you think that you have no idea how you would do it, I can guarantee that there has been a man in that job for 20 odd years who's coasting. So just apply for the job.
Love it.
Absolutely. I love that, actually. Pixie, what would be your superpower to inspire a new generation of women coming into the workplace?
My career is littered with failures. I mean, honestly, I'd be embarrassed to tell you about some of them. And it is definitely, I'm not afraid to fail. I couldn't really care less. You know, if someone says, oh, you look like an idiot, or, you know, you did that all wrong. I mean, you know, unless you put yourself out there, you're never going to achieve anything. And actually have that bit of courage, get in there. You know, my mother used to say, just walk in there and act like you own the place, Pixie. And it's a really, I think it's a really important quality, because people do fail, and most successful people, when you listen to their stories, they are also littered with failures. So yeah, go for it. What can happen? Who cares?
Brilliant. And Holly, in terms of politics and the murky world.
Yeah, for the most part, I would agree with Aoife. Like it's learning to not be intimidated by people, and you know, you're so often condescended, disrespected, disregarded, and to really not be able to be able to not let that get to you, I think is so important in those kind of male dominated fields, because it's very blatant and very prevalent. But as soon as Aoife said that one already, that is probably the most important one in this field. I'd say one of the things, and I don't know if you call this a superpower or a personality flaw, but it's very useful in politics, is that I've realized that I'm quite an obsessive person. So for example, you know, would have been obsessed around the marriage equality referendum, obsessed around the referendum to repeal the 8th, and then became, obsessed with elections and, always around kind of an injustice and wanting that to change. And so like most recently, be like, staying up really late reading the Commission's report into mother and baby homes. But actually in politics, I think it requires a kind of certain amount of obsession, because you have to keep at things and work really hard at things. So like I said, perhaps a bit of a personality flaw, but something that I think has become a bit of a strength in politics. So I'm going to go with obsession.
Great. Vicky, I'm going to ask the four of you this question as well to round things up. I'm trying to end on a positive note. And by the way, it is very positive. Year on year, the change, the evolution, the confidence and the fearlessness that I witness with young girls coming through school. My niece is incredible. She's only 12. She's decided she wants to be, it's just that she's so empowered. It's really exciting, actually. And the change in attitude, we're feeling it, and particularly Vicky and I will be aware of changes that we've seen, strategically coming through. But we want to sort of, there's a list of questions in front of me and I'm jumping into this one. So Vicky, what do you see as the greatest possibilities or causes for optimism in promoting and achieving equality? So where could energy be focused to make the most effective impact to try and achieve equality? I suppose.
I think I alluded to earlier, I really do think we need to start from in the schools and at home and individuals. We could all talk all day about the negativities about equality, but it's up to ourselves and the individuals. I mean, again, as I was talking about those meetings or those talks I've did before and continue to do in rooms full of women, all women, we all talk about it amongst ourselves. I did one once and there were 3 men and we great fun. We actually had great crack and it brought a different level to it. We need to do this together. Boys and girls need to talk to each other. We need to, speak to your parents about it. Everybody needs to jump on this wagon now, instead of us all giving out about it and what are we going to do. We have to be positive. If you look back where we were to where we are now, there's been big change. There has been change. It is improving. My own business is a small business. We have, as I said, we have more ladies than men. Equal pay, absolutely in our place. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl, man or woman, it doesn't matter. It's whoever has got the most cop on really does the best in our business, to be quite honest with you. And I don't see any difference between men and women. I just think we need to start from home. We need to encourage our children. We need to encourage our friends. So if there's a student listening now who's a female and, has a male friend who, kind of was wondering, should he do this or not? She needs to encourage him. He needs to encourage her. We all need to encourage one another. And the sky is the limit. I mean, look what I'm doing. I mean, who knew I could do what I was doing? I hadn't a clue. We actually have more skill set ourselves. We have more skills ourselves than we actually know we have. A lot of us sitting here probably didn't realize how successful we would be. And actually, that's another thing. Everybody needs to remember as well that, that I think people look at me and say, God, she's really successful. But I work really, really hard, 24 hours a day sometimes. There's nothing unique about me. Hard work and belief in oneself is really, really important. And I don't have what you ladies have, that that you're not intimidated. I am. I get terribly nervous about a lot of different things. But I think if you step outside, just be a little bit braver. But anyway, my thing is we all have to do it ourselves. We all have to support one another. And I think that is it, sticking together, supporting one another.
Aoife, and I'm going to come to Pixie and Holly just with the same question very quickly. Aoife, where could our energy be focused for the most positive impact?
I don't think we're going to see any massive structural changes until we elect more women. We need more women on councils. We need more women in the Dáil. We need more women in the Seanad. We don't have any female minister on the cabinet subcommittee for COVID-19. We don't have a female cabinet minister on the cabinet subcommittee for health. There are massive issues. Even like if you look at things like cervical check, the scandal there, it's so clear that it's always men making decisions about women's lives when we are actually 51% of the population. So I think electing more women and supporting more women to get into politics is the only way anything is going to change, because change comes from the top. And I think the government calling for companies like Vicky's and massive companies to have gender equality when they can't even do it themselves is a bit rich. They expect so much from the private sector, but they can't really manage it themselves. So I think if you want to be a role model, do it properly. And I think we are seeing more women coming through, you know, Women for Election say they're dealing with like 900 women or something this year who want to go onto either council or the Dáil or the Seanad or whatever it is, but we're not going to see structural change, and it shouldn't be left to people like Vicky and the private sector to show how well females can do in, you know, high ranking jobs. It should be, why haven't we had a female Taoiseach? Because we've had quite a lot of average men in the Dáil. We have not had a lot of average women because women aren't allowed to be average. So until we can have women who aren't that good at their jobs in the Dáil, we're not going to be anywhere near gender equality.
Thank you, Aoife. Very quickly, text 4HOPE, the number 4HOPE to 50300 if you want to make a donation, or of course you can go to the hopefoundation.ie website. We're a little over time. Very quickly, Pixie, I want to give you a quick word on what you think we can do positively to affect positive change in terms of gender equality. And then Holly, I've got one little question for you and then we'll wrap up.
I think get in early, get into school, educate the boys, because it's all about girls. My daughter's the most empowered, like off the scale empowered, going to change the world. But let's get in and let the boys understand that, you know, everyone's going to work together, you know, support your females, and let's all get on with it and do it together. I think it's very important to get in there and educate them.
Thank you so much, Pixie. And finally, Holly, and Aoife alluded to it, we've never had a female Taoiseach. When's it going to happen, Holly?
I would say after the next election. I mean, the tide is turning in relation to women in politics, and Aoife covered all the points there. But when I was running for the election, when I got to the count centre, a load of young girls were turning up to meet me. And I didn't understand why at the time, but it was they'd never seen a young woman on the posters. And they became so engaged in the election, were turning up. I get letters all the time from young women who are so inspired to see a younger female in politics. And like that, unfortunately, I'm the only female TD in all of Cork, 18 TDs. There's 6 times more Michaels representing Cork than there is women. But it's changing now. I can feel it and I can see it. And for example, people talk a lot about, imagine, you know, a left government with Catherine Connolly as an independent Taoiseach. I could completely visualise that. I don't think it's far down the line, but you know, we need to get more women to stand. We need to support more women. And yeah, I think it will happen sooner rather than later. But I just want to finish on one thing as well, just in relation to texting the Hope number. I went to Calcutta with the Hope Foundation when I was 16 in transition year, and it was a real eye-opener for me. I think it probably shaped me quite a lot as a teenager to have that perspective and to really realise, you know, how lucky we are here. And I just encourage everybody to support the Hope Foundation.
Thank you so much. So Holly, Cairns TD, Vicki O'Toole, Aoife Moore and Dr. Pixie McKenna, thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed that. That was a really great way to start International Women's Weekend pre the day. So listen, best of luck to everybody. Thanks everybody for donating. Thank you Hope Foundation for having us all. It was a real pleasure to be part of this group. And I feel really very, very grateful and very honoured, and the best of luck. Have a lovely weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.